Years ago, a Roman philosopher named Seneca sat down and wrote something that still hits hard today. In his book, Letters from a Stoic, he said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Think about that for a second. He wasn't saying difficulties are okay. He was saying they are the training. The very thing you're trying to escape, the lack, the struggle, the limitation, is the exact thing that sharpens you. But here's where most people get it wrong. They spend so much energy fighting what they don't have. They never stop to use what they do. The strongest person in the room doesn't always win. The richest person doesn't always come out on top. More often than not, the one who wins is the one who thinks when everyone else panics. The one who finds a door when everyone else is staring at a wall. And once you truly see that, once it clicks, you will never look at your limitations the same way again.
Once upon a time, there lived a tortoise in the middle of a lush and peaceful forest. The forest was filled with tall trees, the sounds of birds calling to one another, and a clear river that never ran dry throughout the seasons. Every day the tortoise lived a simple life. He walked slowly along the forest floor, searching for anything he could eat: young leaves, fallen fruit, or scraps of food left along the riverbank. However, all the forest's inhabitants knew one thing about him: he was slow and he was weak. Other animals often looked down on him, not because they were cruel, but simply because that was the reality. In the harsh world of the forest, speed and strength often determined everything. Even so, the tortoise never complained. He simply kept walking, living his days with calm and patience. One day, as usual, he was making his way to the riverbank to find food. The sun was rising, and the air felt warm. Along the way, he spotted a crow standing on the ground, looking restless. In front of the crow were several hard walnut shells. The crow was pecking at them, dropping them, even trying to smash them against rocks. But the shells wouldn't crack. The tortoise paused and watched from a distance. The crow was growing visibly frustrated, its wings flapping and its beak striking the walnuts repeatedly, yet the result was always the same. The tortoise knew he could help. With his strong jaw and steady bite, he was capable of cracking shells just like those. But he chose not to get involved with an already irritated crow. He stayed quiet for a moment, then chose to continue on his way. Not long after, he arrived at a corner of the forest he rarely visited. There he saw something that stopped him in his tracks: a banana tree. And not just any banana tree. The fruit hung low, golden yellow, and perfectly ripe. Its aroma drifted through the air from several steps away. The tortoise swallowed. It had been a long time since he had found food that good. Full of hope, he drew closer. He tried pushing the trunk. It wouldn't move. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. He tried biting the trunk. Useless. His slow steps, short stature, and limited strength gave him no way to reach the fruit. The tortoise went still. For a moment, he simply stared at the bananas without moving. But he did not give up. He slowly stepped back, turned around, and retraced his path, back toward the crow. When he arrived, the crow was still there, and just as before, not a single walnut had been cracked. The crow's expression was now far more frustrated, and she was nearly ready to give up. The tortoise approached calmly. This time, he did not just watch. He spoke. The tortoise stopped a few steps away from the crow. He did not rush to speak. He observed first, making sure the situation was the same as what he had seen before. The crow was still struggling with her walnuts, still failing. Only then did the tortoise speak up. In a kind tone, he said that he might be able to help crack the walnuts. The crow turned to look at him, her gaze full of doubt. Understandably so. In her eyes, the tortoise was nothing more than a slow creature who could barely reach food on his own. But she also knew one thing. She had tried every way she could think of, and all of them had failed. The tortoise then continued with an offer that sounded simple but mutually beneficial. If the crow was willing to help him retrieve the banana fruit at the end of the path he had just come from, then he would help crack all of her walnuts. The crow paused to consider the offer. On one hand, she wasn't sure she could trust the tortoise's abilities. On the other hand, she had no better option. The walnuts were too hard, and she had run out of ideas. In the end, the crow nodded. A deal was made. The tortoise immediately got to work. With his powerful jaw, he bit down on a walnut and pressed steadily. Crack! The shell split open. The walnut's insides were revealed. The crow was astonished. She leaned in and watched more closely. The tortoise moved on to the next walnut. Crack again. There was no doubt left. The tortoise could do what the crow could not. Without wasting any time, the crow kept her end of the bargain. She flew toward the banana tree and from above easily reached the hanging fruit. She picked them one by one and carried them back. She had to make several trips since her feet could only carry one or two at a time. But that was far easier than cracking those hard shells. Meanwhile, the tortoise continued working below, cracking walnut after walnut with patience, unhurried but steady. The partnership flowed smoothly. Neither felt cheated, and neither tried to take more than their share. Each did their part. Before long, both had gotten what they wanted. The tortoise finally got to enjoy the ripe bananas that had been out of his reach. The crow was able to eat the walnut meat that had frustrated her for so long. When it was all done, there were no grand speeches, no celebration, no small talk, just a quiet mutual understanding that the cooperation had worked. The crow prepared to leave, spread her wings, and flew away. But as she went, she thought to herself that even though the tortoise looked weak and slow, he was clearly not foolish. He knew how to use what he had. Meanwhile, the tortoise walked on slowly. His stomach was full. His steps were just as unhurried as always. But that day, he had proven something. That having limitations does not mean you cannot get what you want. He continued walking through the forest, at ease and unsuspecting, until he entered a quieter area. The undergrowth grew denser, and the sounds of the forest fell more silent. Without realizing it, he was not alone. The tortoise kept walking slowly through the increasingly quiet part of the forest, his steps as calm as ever. Then suddenly, from behind the bushes, something moved fast. A large bear burst out and lunged directly at him. There was no time to run, no place to hide. In an instant, the tortoise was in danger, but he did not panic. Without hesitation, he pulled his entire body into his shell. His head, his legs, everything disappeared. All that remained was a hard, rounded shell. The bear was startled for a moment, then began trying every approach. He clawed at the shell. Nothing. He bit it. Could not get through. He even lifted the tortoise and threw him against a rock. Thud. The shell held firm. The bear grew frustrated. What should have been an easy meal was now a source of irritation. Time passed. The bear refused to give up and kept trying, but the result was always the same. No gap, no way in. Inside his shell, the tortoise was thinking. He knew he could not hold out forever. Sooner or later, the bear might find a way. He needed to do something, not with strength, but with his mind. After a few moments, from inside the shell, he began to speak. His voice was soft but clear enough. He told the bear that if he wanted to soften the shell, it needed to be soaked in water. The bear stopped. He thought about those words. Water did often make things softer. Wood could rot, soil could turn to mud. Perhaps this shell was the same. He glanced toward the nearby river, then back at the tortoise. Without much further thought, he made his decision. The bear picked up the tortoise and walked toward the river, his heavy steps steady and purposeful. When he reached the bank, he lowered the tortoise straight into the water. Then he waited. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. But then, suddenly, the tortoise moved. Quickly he extended his legs and head and swam away toward the middle of the river. His movement was far faster than it had been on land. In moments, he was already well beyond the bear's reach, disappearing into the deeper part of the river. The bear stood still, staring at the water that had grown calm again. There was no tortoise left. He finally understood. He had been tricked. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, the tortoise swam on, safe, unharmed, and once again having found his way out of trouble. Not because he was strong, not because he was fast, but because he thought.
From this story, we can see that intelligence is capable of making up for many shortcomings. The tortoise was slow and weak, yet he knew how to use his mind. He did not force himself to rely on strength he did not have. He found another way, and that is what helped him get his food and ultimately saved his life. It is the same in our own lives. Many of us do not have great physical strength, speed, or large amounts of capital. But everyone has the capacity to think. So use that to compensate for what you lack. Sharpen your mind, because more often than not, what determines the outcome is not how strong you are, but how cleverly you find a way forward.